I'm Dr. Mark Lewis, the Executive Director of NDIA's Emerging Technologies Institute, and welcome to another edition of Emerging Technology Horizons. Today, we're going to revisit one of my very favorite subjects, which is hypersonics. And in particular, we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges remaining, maybe discuss a little bit of the progress steps that we can take to move the United States faster in hypersonics. And joining me for that discussion is John Otto, who is the Senior Director leading advanced hypersonic development for Raytheon Missiles and Defense. John has had a very long and distinguished career in aerospace, 25 plus years at Raytheon. So he really brings incredible expertise to this issue of hypersonic weapons. John's got an educational background that includes a bachelor's degree from Cornell University, graduate studies at University of Illinois, and he even has an MBA from Arizona, which he picked up along the way, I understand, in lieu of a PhD. So, John, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I appreciate you having me on. I look forward to the discussion.
Hey, so I want to start off. I mean, there's obviously a lot of talk about the importance of hypersonics. There was a roundtable discussion that the Secretary of Defense hosted in the Pentagon a number of weeks ago with corporate leadership to emphasize the importance of hypersonics. Almost everywhere I think you go now in the Pentagon, people are talking about hypersonics, and so it's obviously that's I think all good news because people are understanding the importance, not just the threat that we're facing from peer competitors, but the fact that hypersonics is an important future capability. And there are a couple of issues that have come up with hypersonics, and if we can, in the course of this discussion, I'd like to explore them. So I want to start off. Can we talk a little bit about how we harness creativity to drive the development, I'm going to say that again. Can we talk about how we can harness creativity in respect to driving development programs that lead to deployment of actual hypersonic systems? What is the right approach? Should we be employing prototype systems? Are there ways to avoid going down paths where redesign would be required? Do we focus on prototype systems? What are your thoughts about how we do this to get hypersonics into the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I think there's a couple areas where you can really focus on, Mark, and going back to what the Secretary of Defense did with the CEOs, bringing them in for that roundtable discussion. There's things on the digital engineering side where we can continue to get better at, the use of modeling and sim. First time we're really going through some of these flight tests with some of these systems, obviously. So there's some learning there, but that's going to be something I think that really helps us accelerate as our models become more advanced and they really become more design and oriented and more predictive of how we're going to be able to fly. Being able to leverage that digital twin is going to be something that helps us go faster. And you hit on something I think that's really important. When you talk about prototype system design versus demonstrator design, that's a key differentiator in terms of your ability to get something out into the field quickly. If you start with the end in mind, the system you're ultimately going to get out into the field, and you use that to drive the development of your demonstration system, then I think you're much better off. You're not going to have to change as much going from the demonstration to getting something out in the field, and that's all time and dollars, and that's something that the customer really is interested in, and we've got to be able to do.
Yeah, I agree, and my hat's off to Raytheon. Frankly, I think the outsider's perspective is you clearly take that approach in the various programs that you're pursuing, and it shows in some of the successes that you've already demonstrated. Yeah, I'd love to hit on the issue of digital engineering. Could you tell us a little bit about what sort of investments are required? How do you get to an integrated approach, and how do you leverage modeling and simulation in digital engineering?
So, the investments that are required, there's some infrastructure that has to be put in place. I think we've become more digital as time has gone on, just through the natural course of events. We've learned a long time ago that having good models is good, but now it's expanding beyond just kind of the engineering models, but all throughout the entire chain of the development cycle, right? So it includes the supply chain side of things, in addition to working on the technical side of things. So you really just want to kind of broaden it out so you've got a much more connected development environment or ecosystem that you're operating in. Yeah, but it's really putting that infrastructure in place, and I think there's um, as we become more advanced in these things, I think there's also the way you train engineers and the way you bring them about. I think as you talked about me being in the industry for 25 years. The way we do things today is very much different than it was when I first joined the company. And I think continuing to take advantage of those advances, and as we work with the universities as part of what we do, I think we have an opportunity to really influence the next generation of engineers so they can continue to take the digital aspect of what we're doing and drive it further. Because the better off we are from a digital perspective, I think the quicker we're going to be able to get things out of it.
So let me ask the skeptical question that I often get about digital engineering, which is, well, is it really just fancy CAD CAM, or is it something more? So can you tell us how you use it in Raytheon? I'm assuming it's something more.
Yeah, no, it's something more. I mean, it really is. It's a design tool. Is where it kind of starts. It's not just CAD and CAM, but it's really taking an integrated approach to looking at the aero, the thermal, the structural, and all the disciplines that go into developing a system. I think when you're talking about anything that's really high speed, you have by its nature a very integrated design. So your tool set's going to have to be integrated as well. Otherwise, it's just kind of a piecemeal approach to development, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth in that kind of a design cycle, and that's going to take time and money, and nobody really wants to see that. So you really have to draw all the aspects together, and your digital approach has got to be mimicking what your system is going to be from an integration perspective.
I've argued myself that a hypersonic vehicle is probably the most fully integrated aerospace system that I can conceive of, and so obviously makes sense that digital tools are valuable in accomplishing that level of integration. How do you validate digital engineering?
Well, you still have to go back and test, right? You can't get away from that. As you're doing it the first time around, you have to go in and you have to be able to gather the data. You have to compare it to what you saw when you were doing your predictions, and then if it doesn't match, then you got to go in, you got to relook at your models, and you got to tweak them until you get that match. And then as you become much more confident in your tools, then you can start winnowing away at the testing that's really required, and you can rely on the digital aspect of it more than you could before.
So I know you mentioned working with universities, and of course the department is investing very heavily in universities. And I can think of, again, no area quite like hypersonics where we're still trying to resolve some of the fundamental science. When do boundary layers transition? What's the effect of chemistry? Questions we answered long ago in other flight regimes we're still wrestling with. Is Raytheon also working along those lines? Is that something that you're focused on?
Yeah, we are. I think anytime you get involved with universities or other groups, and you can start drawing more people into the conversation, the better off you're going to be. The difference in perspective that you get from people who work and do things in a different environment than you on an everyday basis is definitely helpful. In the universities, they really do a good job, looking at the fundamental research side of things, and being able to see how that gets developed, and you can take a lot of things away from that. In addition to you start working with the next generation of of engineers that are going to take over what we're doing today, and hopefully drive it even further beyond where we're at today. So you get that real good interaction where they get to see a little bit about what industry does. We get to see a little bit about what they do, and I think that partnership, I think, is going to be good for everybody going forward.
So that's a good lead into the issue of workforce development. First, how are we doing in the hypersonic workforce? Do we still have an unmet need for talent in the field?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head. When you said that there's more and more talk about hypersonic systems, right. And that's going to drive more and more demand for those systems. We hope, and then so you're going to have to be able to fill that need with the engineers coming in behind it. I think there are some fairly specialized. You hit on a number of things that are fairly specialized with respect to hypersonic systems, but also there's a lot of other pieces that go into the systems we develop, and there's a lot of engineers that can be tapped from and pulled into the hypersonic arena, and they can help us push the design forward in those areas too. So we have to keep our eye on the ball with what we're doing with the engineering workforce going forward, because as these systems proliferate more, we got to make sure we can meet the demand on the engineering side.
Good news. I've often said that nothing is more exciting to a new aerospace engineer than hypersonic flight. I mean, it is faster, it is higher, it is pushing the edge, it is pushing the envelope. There's a reason the new Top Gun movie has a hypersonic airplane in it. But having said that, what approaches are you taking? How are you helping, working with universities? Are you thinking in terms of academic partnerships or supporting STEM education in some way?
Yeah, so we being in Tucson, we've got the University of Arizona in our backyard, and we're tied with them on the development of some of their facilities.
Mm-hmm.
We've worked hand in hand with them to try to get some facilities funded, like wind tunnel facilities and things like that. And those things will definitely be useful to the students at that university. Also, as part of the JHTO office in the consortium there, we're involved with a number of projects as part of that effort, and that allows us to reach an even broader set of universities.
So that's the University Consortium for Advanced Hypersonics.
The University Consortium. Yep. Yeah. So we're involved in that, and through that effort, there's several projects, and so a lot of those things really get at answering some of the tough questions that we're going to face going forward, and really starting to peel the layers back on some of the challenging problems we're going to have to face going forward with these kinds of systems.
So do you have Raytheon engineers working hand in hand with faculty and students directly, or?
We do. Yeah, we do. We've got an organization that's basically set up to interface with that consortium. And then as part of their effort, they tie in with the universities, we write the proposals, we team up there. And then, as the projects come in, we're also involved in how those projects go forward. And, some of our, we try to bring, a bit of the industrial perspective to those projects, right? So we want to kind of shape them, make sure that they're going in a direction that we think is really going to be helpful to our systems going forward. And then, again, through that interaction, you get to see a lot more about what they do, and working with those universities and the students, it's really a good partnership to try to keep the pipeline going.
It's also got to be exciting for them that they know that they're working on real systems, that they're working on things that are actually going to wind up in flight, in products.
Yeah, when I was in grad school, I don't know if you had this similar experience, but I was funded through industry when I was doing my graduate work, and it was just always a fun thing whenever the contractor came to visit us, and you get a chance to talk to them and just kind of pick their brain about what really bothered them and what they were focused on, and we're trying to give that same experience to the students today.
Yeah, I was also, part of my graduate funding was from industry, and you're exactly right. It was the early days of the NASA program. So,
really?
Which of course never got built, but we sure learned a lot. but having the industrial perspective of this is what we're concerned about, these are the issues we need to solve was for me was fascinating and motivating. So really good.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. As a student, you're kind of focused on kind of what's in front of you, and you just don't have that perspective, and so the more we can engage and share that information with people, I think the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, in discussing your university work, you mentioned building wind tunnels, and I know in the past we've talked about the U.S.'s test capability in hypersonics. First, give me your assessment as someone as a leader in industry. Where are we right now as a nation in our hypersonic test infrastructure?
Yeah, we've got some great facilities out there, Mark, that we can do some really wonderful things with, but quite frankly, the facilities are in a little bit of short supply. They're really being tapped, which is a good thing, right? Because we need to do the work there. If we had more, could we use them?
Yeah,
you bet we could.
Yeah,
right. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to fill up, if we had more capacity there.
So what's the solution? Do we need to be building more wind tunnels, expanding capability of existing facilities, all of the above?
It's probably a little bit of all the above. I think the more facilities we have, I think the better off we're going to be. It's one of those things where, you know how valuable it is when you can't get to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to have to face a delay or something along those lines because you can't get in and get through a test. Now, through digital engineering, I think we'll be able to also ease that somewhat. But again, when you're doing new developments and you're basing new systems based on what can be somewhat unproven technology, you still have to go through and you have to do those tests and you have to learn that way. And so, there's still going to be a demand for it, and as we increase and proliferate these types of systems, I think that demand's going to increase.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any anecdotes where you really wish you'd had more wind tunnel capability available for a program or anything?
Well, I work with engineers. There's never enough test time, right?
Okay, okay, yeah,
But no, yeah, we've always looked at getting into the tunnel and learning as much as we can every time we get in there. So it's always about trying to maximize, the time that you have there and making sure you're not, missing something because getting back in isn't always the easiest thing to do.
right. So you run a test, you see something interesting, you say, "Wait, we want to do that one more test." Yeah, sorry, you're out of luck.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
you've also got to be prepared for those types of things. You got to really think your way through the test and say, okay, this could happen or that could happen. So are you prepared to be able to branch off one direction or another if the opportunity arises? I mean, I'm sure you've done this
yeah,
a number of times too. It's just sometimes you don't know what's going to happen.
yeah.
I mean, you have an idea, but you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. So you're learning on the fly, and your ability to react to that in a quick fashion, really helps you maximize the value of the test.
Yeah, I'd even argue that the reason you do the test is because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. If you knew exactly what was going to happen, you wouldn't need to do the test. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
sometimes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes it's the easiest way to figure something out too, right?
yeah.
Especially if
So
you're trying to develop
what
a
about
modeling
flight test?
capability.
How do we stand in regard to our flight test capabilities? Obviously, we always want to see more, but is what's our how would you rank our current state right now?
I think you're kind of in a similar situation with some of the other test facilities. There's an awful lot of tests going on out there, and there's only so many resources, and so trying to prioritize those is something I think that's a big job, and you're trying to make sure that you're balancing. It's a tough job for the folks that are doing it because you're trying to balance what you need to do from an operational perspective today versus the development that you're trying to put in place for tomorrow's systems. So it's always a bit of a battle to try to get in there and test and make sure that you're testing when you need to and that it's not kind of what's limiting your ability to get stuff out.
Yeah, and you're not just competing with hypersonic systems on the test range; you're competing with so many other programs. Yeah,
No, you absolutely are. I mean, everybody wants to test. It's kind of that graduation
yeah.
exercise when you get out there for the flight test. So being
I
able to see
personally
that
kind of
is
long
really
for the
important.
days of the X-15 when we could fly every 18 days and you could fly and test, and if it didn't work, you flew it again. You figured out what went wrong. If only we could get back to that sort of mindset.
Yeah.
But
Yep. No, that would be a wonderful thing. That'd be a great situation to be in.
yeah, I once got myself in trouble with the with the museum director for suggesting that, hey, maybe we pull one of the X-15s out of the museum and start flying it again. And that didn't go over very well. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable prospect to me. So
Yeah.
we've obviously hypersonics is we've got some international competition. There's been a lot said and written about Russia and China, and they haven't been shy about bragging about their capabilities. Russia most recently in Ukraine, and China and their military parades. But there are also international friends that we work with and partnerships. Could you say a little bit about your feelings on allied collaboration and partnership? Is it essential? Is it useful? Is it necessary?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we see is the warfighter pushing for more coalition warfare opportunities. So I think that's something that really that's going to be driven by what the warfighter wants to do and how they want to prosecute the missions. But I think that's something that we have to be aware of, and we have to be able to support the directions that they want to go. So it's important. If it's important for them, then it's also important for us to be able to help them meet their objectives.
Plus, I'd argue. First, I've always said the United States has only about 4% of the world's population, so arguably we've only got roughly 4% of the smart people in the world, right?
Yeah.
and hypersonics is an area we've had some really great international partnerships. Australia immediately comes to mind. Some other countries that we've been working with. So let me, if I could, then the Department of Defense has signaled its desire to deliver hypersonics at scale, and I think if there's anything that Raytheon knows how to do, it's how to deliver weapons at scale. You've been in this business for a while. What steps would you like to see us take to actually deliver hypersonic capabilities? Not onesies, twosies, not a flight test here, a flight test there, but actually deliver useful hypersonic weapons in the numbers that will make a difference to our warfighters.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that can be done there. I think what we really want to try to do is, going back to your discussion about focusing on prototypes. I think that's really important. We've got to make sure that we're doing development in a way that allows us to get out into the field quickly, versus maybe demonstrating something and then having to go back and redesign the system in order to get it out there. I think that the other piece of it is there's got to be a commitment to really being able to field these types of systems, and I think we're really seeing that now, right? And I think we're you said we've got 4% of the smart people. We've got an awful lot of smart people in this country. It's not that we can't do these things. I don't think we've really committed to doing it.
We sure do.
And I think, when you look at what you're seeing in the budgets and with what people are saying, you're starting to see that commitment come through. And as long as we follow through on that commitment, I think we'll be able to do what the warfighter needs.
Yeah. No, and I actually think we have more than 4% of the smart people, but what I actually think we really have are the truly innovative thinkers. And I'll make the claim, I honestly haven't seen any foreign system that made me step back and say, oh, I never thought of that, or our folks never thought of that. So far, everything I've seen has been pretty derivative.
No, I think you're right, and I agree with you. I work with a lot of wonderful people that are highly talented and very skilled in what they do, and that's one of the things I really like about my job.
So let me ask, what in the realm of hypersonics, what keeps you awake at night? What do you worry about the most?
That's a really good question. I think we've got to kind of hit this. There is no one thing that really keeps me awake at night. I think what we do is really challenging, and you've hit on some of the things that we have to be able to do in order to make our system successful. It's how do you continue to develop things quickly, and you have to do it in the environment that we're in today. So there's going to be challenges with your test facilities. You've also got to make sure that you've got the right people in place to do the job, and you've got to be able to couple those things and get them going in the right direction in an environment where you're still learning a lot. So as you go and you continue to push these systems forward and you learn, you've got to be able to adapt, and you've got to be able to adjust to what you learn, and you got to be able to do it quickly. I think so. It's all those things that they all have to fit together to make a system come about, and so there's really no one thing that keeps me up at night. It's the whole. It's everything you need to do to get a system put in place. It's all very integrated, as you were saying earlier. It's not just the systems, but your simulation capability and your workforce and everything has got to be very integrated.
Well, John, I know you and your team have had some notable successes recently, so you are making it happen. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what your team is doing, and thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Obviously, hypersonics, as you know, is a favorite topic, and it's just rewarding to see the progress that Raytheon and other companies are making in this area.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the time, Mark. We've got a lot of great people working on this problem, and when you can see a success, it just makes everybody feel good and want to do, and makes them want to do more. So appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us on this episode.